And Jules, you may begin.
Okay.
Yeah, go up there and then click.
Um, let me click that. Okay. Hold on.
Click slideshow and
not
then
here.
view from the first
Can
slide.
everybody- Can y'all see this?
We're on the discussion question slide. So go to the beginning there. There you go.
Okay. Hold on, give me 1 second. Can y'all see this?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Is that bad? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. This is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. That's actually the title of it. It's directed by Stanley Kubrick. It was written by Stanley Kubrick, Terry Southern, and Peter George. This is Stanley Kubrick. He's a director. He was famous for 2001 Space Odyssey in 1968, Barry Lyndon, 1975, A Clockwork Orange, 1971, and Full Metal Jacket, 1987. These are the main characters. This is Peter Sellers as the group captain. He's the one on top. He's the group captain. Lionel Mandrake. He's the one on top. George C. Scott as General Buck Turgidson, which is the one on the left, and Sterling Hayden as Brig General Jack D. Ripper, and he's the one in the middle. He's the one on the right. This is Peter Sellers. He was born September 8th, 1925. He passed away July 24th, 1980. He's known for Being There, 1979, Dr. Strangelove, which is this movie, 1964, Return of the Pink Panther, 1975, and The Pink Panther Strikes Again, 1976. This is George C. Scott. He was born October 18th, 1927, passed away September 22nd, 1999. He's known for Patton, I think that's how you pronounce that, 1970, The Hustler, 1961, The Changeling, 1980, and Dr. Strangelove, 1964. This is Sterling Hayden, born March 26th, 1916. He passed away May 23rd, 1986. He is known for Dr. Strangelove, 1964, The Killing, 1956, The Godfather, 1972, and The Long Goodbye in 1973. It's about the military and stuff. It's death because they're trying to bomb people. Paranoia and worry. The guy was worried that the General Jack D. Ripper was worried that those people, the Soviet Union was going to do something to our precious bodily fluids. And then the nuclear war thing is because they were going to have a nuclear war, and suicide. I put that in there because where he walked in the bathroom and killed himself. So the plot: an Air Force general by the name of Jack Ripper orders an attack on the Soviet Union because he thinks they're going to pollute our precious bodily fluids. And the fun facts are, as research, Stanley Kubrick read nearly 50 books about nuclear war. It was Stanley Kubrick's last black and white film. The filming was done in Banff Natural Park, Alberta, Canada. The film was done in Russian and English, and it was released in the USA on January 29th, 1964. Whoa, what happened? And choose the discussion questions if you can see them. And that's it.
All right. You can stop your shares, Jules, and we'll get to your
Okay.
discussion questions organically there.
I think I stopped the share, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
So, yeah, what did you guys, of course, just a few comments from me here on the movie. I can only say this. I didn't realize when I picked this movie back in December to put on the syllabus how much this movie would become sort of scary, right? Because think about all the renewed hostilities between the United States and Russia now. We have a madman in charge of Russia, right? Who wants to recreate the Soviet Union. So little did I know how much hostilities would escalate, when I picked this movie to be on the syllabus. So looking at it as a Cold War comedy, it suddenly, the idea in the film suddenly became very real again.
That's what I meant with one of my questions by like, how does this relate kind of to today? Like,
yeah, like you can kind of imagine, like back then, of course, there was all kinds of worry and anxiety about nuclear war. Of course, I don't know how much you guys have taken about the Cold War, how much you guys have learned about it in maybe your history classes, maybe in high school or even here in college. But the Cold War was a time of great anxiety, great paranoia. Of course, even in the school systems, like they would have drills with students, like here's what you do in case a nuclear bomb strikes. Get under your desk.
and then they had the I think it was the Russian Missile Crisis or was it the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened just before this movie came out, right? So, yeah, they were constantly in a state of worry about nuclear war. And one fun fact about the movie is the footage at the end of the movie that shows all the nuclear bombs going off. That's actual footage from military tests that they did with nuclear bombs. They've let off hundreds of nuclear bombs in the world and different test sites during the Cold War. So different test sites that didn't have people there, of course. But yeah, all that footage was actual footage of a dropping a nuke, right? So one reason why the movie was in black and white was probably because of that, right? Because I think that's how the military would have filmed it. The actual light would have probably destroyed the camera. So Yeah, actual nuclear bomb footage there at the end. And some great performances in the movie. Of course, Jules, you mentioned George C. Scott, who plays the general. George C. Scott's a very famous actor. His most famous role is Patton. He won the Academy Award for playing the George Patton in the biographical film about Patton in World War II. He's also in a ton of other great movies. He played in The Exorcist 3, which is probably one of the, besides the original Exorcist, it's probably the best movie in the franchise.
There was one person that I was like, I was talking about when I said, "Have you seen somebody else before that you knew?" And you know what I mean, in the movie. And I was talking about James Earl Jones. He's one of the And I was like, let me see if anybody else knows this. So that's why I added that question.
Yeah, James Earl Jones was in the movie too. He was one of the people working in the plane. Of course, you know, everybody knows James Earl Jones, right? Darth Vader's voice. He's in all kinds of movies, Field of Dreams. He was in Mate One, the Mate One movie. Yeah, so yeah, he
was a whole lot younger in this movie though.
Yeah, everybody's used to older James Earl Jones, but very young in this. Yeah, of course, Peter Sellers is a very famous comic actor as well. He plays two roles, both the guy at the base as well as Dr. Strangelove at the end. So he actually plays two roles here in the film. So
isn't he the president too? I thought he was the president, dude.
Is he the president too? Maybe he was, and I missed that. Let me look here on IMDb. IMDb knows all. Yep, he's the president, as well as Dr. Strangelove, as well as the Colonel. So yeah, Peter Sellers plays three parts here. Yeah, we already saw one film from Stanley Kubrick in the class, which was Clockwork Orange. Of course, we had a really interesting discussion of that film. But this movie shows you a different side of Kubrick, just for the fact that he's filming in black and white. Right? Remember from Clockwork Orange, one of the things we talked about is his very vibrant use of color. Well, here he's using black and white. And you know that everything this guy did had a purpose, because he's probably the most legendary director in the history of Hollywood. Right? So everything he did had a purpose. So yeah, this of course is a bit of an earlier film for him. Clockwork Orange would come out almost 7 or 8 years later. Of course, he did The Shining as well, as if you recall from our Clockwork Orange discussion. So what to say about the film then? One of the questions was about comedy that Jules asked. And I'll just say this, guys, comedy is an extremely challenging genre to teach. That's why I always save it for last in this class, because one of the things about comedy is that different things are funny in different times and places. Of course, everybody's sense of humor is different. Some people have, I don't know, very vulgar senses of humor, right? Some people have very dry senses of humor.
Or dark senses of humor.
really dark, messed up sense of humor, right? So this movie kind of has a lot of the dark humor as well as some of the real. It's both. This movie's a nice mix of dark and dry humor, right? Like a lot of the one-liners and stuff are pretty funny. This isn't a movie you're gonna have belly laughs watching, right? But there is lots of funny stuff that's going on in the movie. And this is a movie that's not taking itself too seriously. If any of you guys are video gamers in here, this is very similar to like the Fallout video games as far as like tone and mood and all that. So you're dealing with very serious content, but it's at the same time it's light at the same time.
That's what my son said. He watched it with me, some of it. Well, not all of it, some of it. And he's like, this is like Fallout because he plays that. And one of the nurses, I was talking to one of the nurses, and we found it funny because we was talking about the guy moving his arm, the alien limb limb movement disorder. It's like an actual thing, and that's what he was doing.
Right.
And the planes being B-52s and it being like the general guy being all crazy, and B-52 and nursing is like Benadryl. It's a cocktail that we give, a shot that you give people like drugs, and it's like you get 50 of Benadryl, 50 of Benadryl, 5 of powder, and 2 of Ativan. And it's just, that's a psychiatric shot, like a shot that I don't know if they did that purpose with the plane being called like a B-52, but it just made me funny. It just made it funny to me.
Is that the shot, Jessica, that they give you like when you're in a mental hospital and you're not calming down? Is that the shot they give you in the butt?
Yes, so they can give you just like an Ativan or Haldol, but like if you're really, really messed up and I think you need more than that, they will give you what they call a B-52, and it's a cocktail mix of 50 of Benadryl, like you take to help you sleep, 5 of Haldol, which is an antipsychotic, and 2 of Ativan, which is like your anxiety, like anxiety.
I've seen somebody take one of those. Like I was in a mental hospital one time, and this guy was not calming down, and they just grabbed him and gave him a shot in the butt, and I was like, well, and he slept really good after that.
Was he cooperative or not cooperative? Because like the B-52 is what we give, like when you're pushing them on the ground and you have one holding them down. I had to give it once when a patient went to hit a nurse. We had to hold him.
He wasn't. He was just out of control, and they were trying to calm him down, to calm the rest of the patients down and everything.
Okay, yeah. If he's physically violent, then we would give it. But if it's not, he probably just got Haldol, because Haldol will knock you out too.
It was like a yellow shot.
Yeah, that sounds like that would knock a person out for days, much less one day.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what would be yellow, because I know the Ativan is still, I mean, it does kind of have a yellowish tint to it, so it may have been that. It's more, to me, this look more clear, but it could be depending on what pharmacy they use to mix it up, because like different pharmacies use different, like patients get so upset sometimes when we give them a pill and the pill is round, but when they take it at home it's an oval, because different manufacturers manufacture stuff different, so it may have been a little bit more yellow than what we usually use while I work. I don't know if you was at CMC or not, because that's why I
was at Mildred Bateman.
Okay, so yeah, they may have a different manufacturer, because ours is more clear.
Yeah.
Is that where you work, Jessica? Mental hospital?
No, I used to work for CMC. I don't do pediatric home health with patients, but I used to work for CMC in the float pool, and I would float to all the departments, and I seemed like I would float to the ER or the psych floor at general a lot, and that's why that's where we use the B-52 a lot at, is in the ERs and the psych floor. So I've seen it a couple of times, but no, I just went everywhere. I'd work with the NICU babies, and I'd work on the regular floor. All 3 hospitals, I'd just be everywhere. I even went to Taze Valley a few times.
Yeah, getting back to the discussion of comedy here, right? So I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Different things are funny to different generations. I think this movie is really funny and witty. This is that sort of like witty humor. Um, like the stuff when he's trying to call the president in the phone booth and there's not enough quarters. That's something we can't relate to these days, right? Because we all have cell phones. But back in the old phone booth days, you missing a quarter and you needed a quarter to call the president.
That reminds me of but that reminds me of when I was a kid and my mom was like on a payphone outside of Walmart, and like I guess the machine next to it, which was a newspaper machine, was broken because you could push the thing and these quarters would come out. So I'm just little me is handing my mother all these quarters and she's just putting them in the phone machine, and then finally she looks over and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm giving you quarters."
Yeah, so that those machines that they had to shoot the Coke machine out to get the quarters, right? That was funny. There's lots of just like dry stuff in the movie, like Dr. Strangelove being this German Nazi scientist. He can't because of his phantom limb thing. He can't help but do the Nazi salute. He can't control his arm, so that's a bit of funny humor here. The guy General Ripper, he's a pretty funny character, right? Just because of his weird conspiracy theory about how the Russians are trying to drain our bodily fluids or something, right? How serious of a performance he gives when he thinks that. That's a humorous angle in the movie. So
he mentioned fluoride, and I was like, I know that conspiracy theory. I actually know quite a few people that believe in it. So I was just laugh out, like I would do like a little like chuckle right there. I was like, "Yep, you sound like my grandfather."
Tell me about this theory because I don't know anything about it.
They believe when they put fluoride in the water, it's supposed to help with cavities and stuff. But people believe it's a brainwashing thing. They put it in to make people's brains weaker and easier to control. So it went along with the communist thing. So it's a whole big thing. But people are convinced if you put fluoride in the water, you're going to be mind controlled by the government. If you ever watched King of the Hill, it's very Rusty Shackelford type vibes.
My uncle believes he's not the brain control, but he's like one of these health people. Like he eats like 100% natural everything, like farm raised chicken. Like everything has to be natural from the butcher or like whatever. And he believes that fluoride causes cancer and that it causes like a whole bunch of health issues, and it's part of the reason why there's a rise in autism and everything. Like he's like completely against fluoride. Also, he's like on this big conspiracy that you should never drink it. And he's to the point he's trying to figure out he wants a well. He's buying a new house. He's trying to find well water because he thinks that bathing in it can even cause harm.
I grew up with well water. I'm telling you, it's since I moved to West Virginia, I miss well water because the chemicals in the well water are so strong. It still burns my eyes to this day. I was raised with well water until I was almost 11. I miss it. I feel a lot better in well water and stuff like that. I will agree there's something in the water here that it's a lot different than in Kentucky.
Yeah, I won't drink water out of the faucet here. I never have.
I loved the end of the movie when he was talking about like how they was gonna have to do all the caves, and the German guy was like, 10 women to every man and all that. And like first they was all worried, but then they was like, yeah, they need to live in these caves.
The general was all on board then, right? He he was hesitant at first, but once they brought that up, the general was all in.
Then the guy like sneakily taking pictures of everything and of the big board.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. No, you go ahead, Shay.
This is kind of off topic, but in my discussion question that I answered about the color in black and white, I said that it gave off like Godfather vibes, and I didn't know that he directed it. I genuinely just thought they were kind of similar because black and white, and it was kind of serious. So that's just off topic. I just wanted to say that.
No, Coppola didn't, or Kubrick didn't direct Godfather, so yeah, you were right to mention that, because he didn't direct The Godfather. Another director did The Godfather.
Oh, okay.
Francis Ford Coppola, that's who directed The Godfather. But yeah, The Godfather's in color, right? It's very bleak colors.
Yeah, that's what I was like kind of comparing it to. Like if it was in color, then that's what it would kind of give off to me, like those types of vibes.
Yeah, I imagine that if Kubrick would have filmed this in color, I bet the war room would have been very bright and vibrant. The guy who designed the sets for this movie designed the sets for the 1960s James Bond movies too. So if you guys have ever seen like Goldfinger or From Russia with Love or Thunderball, like any of those old Sean Connery James Bond movies, and the same guy who made the sets for this movie made the sets there. So this movie definitely feels like an old James Bond movie in a way too. That's not an accident because it's the same set designer. I don't know if any of you guys are Bond fans in here. Yeah, I'm a little too much of a Bond fan. I've seen all 20 some movies, probably God knows how many times. The latest Bond movie sucked, though. I hated it. So I will never watch that one again. So I left the theater very salty after watching the newest James Bond movie. I'm not going to spoil why. If you've seen it, you probably know why I was salty. Yeah, as far as, like I said, as far as humor goes, humor is something that's interesting to talk about because, like, even with me, I'm a millennial, right? So millennials all we have their own sense of humor. So, like, we grew up with movies like, I don't know, Mean Girls, Super Bad, a lot of those like raunch coms, right? You guys today, the Gen Z, right? Movies aren't even really, you don't really even see a lot of comic movies now. Most of the humor and stuff now comes from stuff like TikTok, things like that, right? So even different types of media for different generations is interesting here to talk about with humor. Our next film up, 16 Candles, is an 80s romantic comedy. So like you'll kind of get that sort of vibe. But the movie we'll do a week from now, Fargo, you're again going to ask, why did you think this is a comedy? But it's definitely a sort of dark, dreary, messed up humor kind of comedy. So if you like the messed up kinds of humor, that movie will be for you. But in general, you guys tell me, how would you describe your sense of humor? What types of things do you look out for when you want to watch a comedy?
Dead puppies. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
my humor is kind of all over the place. Maybe because like my mom's sense of humor is a lot different from my stepdad's. But so I was raised, my dad's like, what's that called? They had Johnny Knoxville in it.
Jackass.
Yes.
Yeah.
His humor is more so of that. My mom's is more like the typical like haha rom-coms. So I laugh when a kid gets pushed down. I won't lie. I think it's kind of funny when they like hit the floor and they're like scared for a second. I'll help them up, but I will laugh at them first. But I'm a big horror fan. I laugh at the most bizarre things. I watch murder documentaries and I laugh at the killer's mistakes. If that makes sense. I'm like, you shouldn't have done this, you should have done this, and I'll laugh about it. Freaks my mom out. But that's what I do. So my humor's kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time because I'm on TikTok a lot and I think my humor's broken on there.
What do you mean by broken?
The most bizarre things are on my TikTok that I will laugh at.
The algorithm has figured you out, Jade. Ask the Chinese government, right? That they will know your sense of humor, considering they own TikTok.
I don't think they understand because 1 minute it'd be like, just let's see if we can weld a sword. And I'm like, I've never watched a thing. Next thing you'll be like, okay, it would be a guy falling down a flight of stairs. Or the Scream guy, like Ghostface, he pops up a lot on my TikTok. I'm like, okay, haven't watched any of the Scream movies in a while. Like the movies, but I don't know why you're here.
Yeah, I would probably describe my own sense of humor as being very similar, Jaden. Like I like the horror comedy and the messed up humor and all that stuff. I can also appreciate a good, I don't know, physical comedy. I can appreciate that type of comedy too. Like when people, like you said, people falling down or Three Stooges type comedy. I can always get behind that too.
I grew up with Three Stooges. I love them.
How would the rest of you guys describe your sense of humor and with comedy?
I've got kind of like a good sense of humor, but I've also got a dark sense of humor. And then I laugh at like the dumbest stuff. Like my dog could run into a tree and I'd be like, so I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say I'm in like the same boat as like Jaden, which is just social media has like ruined my sense of humor. It's the most random things can make me laugh, even if it's not even that funny.
Yeah, it would be a fun study to do if somebody ever did a paper on like the effect of social media on comedy, because it definitely has made a big difference.
I'm big into rom-coms. I like when people's embarrassed and it's just has that tension of, falling in love, but at the same time, you just totally embarrass yourself.
Yeah, you'll like the next movie then, Jessica, the 16 Candles, if you've never seen it before.
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
I always do a John Hughes movie every class just because he's so significant as a director. What about the rest of y'all? How would you define your sense of humor?
Absolutely stupid. Like I could laugh probably at anything. I giggle a lot. So, and plus I laugh too when I'm nervous. So it's kind of confusing to my body because it's like, I don't know if this is funny or if I'm nervous or everything. I just laugh at anything.
I'm right there with you. When I don't know how to process emotions. It's what I've realized over the years. because when I'm upset, I'll get so mad I'll cry, and then I'll start laughing at the fact I'm crying, and it confuses my mom. It's like, are you mad? Are you happy? What's going on? It's like, I'm broken. Just let me have this anger fit before I throw things.
That is literally me too. I laugh and cry all the time.
A bit of both. You never know what you're doing.
I keep people on their toes.
I find when something is like really serious and you're not supposed to laugh, that's the moment my body's like, "Hey, let's laugh," and I'm like, "No, brain, no."
Well, the movie, to build on that, Jules, I think the movie kind of builds on that. Like you mentioned, the suicide part, right? The movie made that, but the movie tried to turn something so dark as that, make a joke of it with the general doing that.
I really like the Bucky character. He called everyone Buck, but so that his secretary called him Bucky. So I'm gonna go Bucky. I liked him because in certain scenes, especially got really excited for that one part, just explaining things. He reminded me of Beetlejuice, and I was like, I actually laughed at that part. I was like, this is so bizarre, and I love it.
Yeah, he kind of gives very similar like physical acting there, like as Michael Keaton did in Beetlejuice. Now, if you say it, Jaden.
For a split second, he even sounded like him, and I was like, I had to search up for a second. I was like, I don't think they were made around the same time. Actually, I know they're not. What's going on here?
Yeah, Michael Keaton might have been inspired by this movie. That would be an interesting thing to look up. Stacy, I haven't heard from you today. How would you define your sense of humor?
I'm sorry, I was trying to multitask. Several of my senior citizens that are 60 and older. I'm doing art for them this evening, so I was trying to. It was kind of loud. I had to sneak away to a different room. I was trying to listen to though and help them paint some pictures. But I do think I agree. I think that it was like a lot of, I guess, kind of like dark comedy. It's kind of like one of those situations where it's like, it's a serious situation, but it's like, what are you going to do? You got to, I guess, kind of, make the, it was kind of like just some of that, like, well, let me think. Like in my discussion post that I put, it's a serious situation, and but he's trying to do. I think somebody else touched on this a minute ago about the Coke machine, and that was something I put in my discussion. Like it's this serious, but it's like he's getting a Coke so he can have change to like get on a payphone or something like that. So, so that was, it's kind of like, yeah, we're in a life altering situation here, but it's like, okay, what else are we going to do? But I also agree about social media because there's so many like memes nowadays. There's so many different things that's just like, I don't know, like there's a lot of stuff even that I see that I'm like, like laughing to myself that I would not share necessarily with other people because I'm like, they're probably going to look at me and think you're crazy or how absurd that you even think that that is funny. So there's a lot of things that I see or a lot of, like little TikToks or little videos, different things like that. But I do think that it was kind of like on the dark humor side. It was like, hey, there's this really, serious situation, but what are we going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the humor in this movie is kind of nihilistic, right? Of course, if you guys don't know what the nihilism means, nihilism is this sort of screw it, right? The world is meaningless kind of humor, right? Like everything is meaningless, life is meaningless. Like we're all ants in the larger scheme of the cosmos, right? So let's just laugh at how meaningless our existences are, right? This movie kind of has that very depressed person kind of humor to it, right? If that makes sense. Of course, you can kind of guess why the movie would be like that, right? Because the nuclear war, the Cold War, kind of instilled that in people a little bit, right? Life can go within the blink of an eye with a nuclear strike. So, yeah, you can kind of see why that sort of nihilistic humor would show up here. If you guys want an example of a nihilistic character in a movie, like the Joker in The Dark Knight, right? He's a classic nihilist sort of character. So if you have a tendency towards being a little nihilistic sometimes, right, rejecting everything and life is meaningless and all this stuff, right? This movie would probably resonate with that type of humor. But Stacy, the comment you had about what would you laugh at today and things like that, that's an interesting comment because, like, even today with comedy, we have our society today definitely has a sense of political correctness, right? That sometimes you wonder to yourself, should I laugh at that, right? Is that funny? Will I offend anyone if I laugh? Right?
Yeah, it's almost like you see, like there's some things that's like it's not your average, like you tell a joke that's literally funny for everybody and everybody gets it. It's almost like it's I guess like a mature comedy. It's like it's like a joke or not even a joke. It's just like maybe a comment or something or a certain scene or something that's kind of like for mature audiences because it's not necessarily meant to be funny, but it comes across in a humorous way just because but it's almost like you're mature enough to deal with that kind of a joke. It's not something that you would say, like, say, to a kid that's, or not even a kid, but like, how when certain kids, because I know like my kids at church, there's some things in front of like my group of kids, there's some kids that are mature enough, you know what I mean, that you can talk about certain things with them. And then there's some things that you just don't even want to mention that. You don't even want to touch that topic because then they're going to be saying it completely the wrong way the whole rest of the class, and you're like, yeah, I just blew that out of the water. But it's almost like that movie, and certain like little jokes or little things, it's almost like even if you're not mature enough, you maybe wouldn't even get it at all. But society's so easily offended with things, and it's almost like, even if you do just laugh, then it's almost like you're you know what I mean? You're either for something or completely against something that doesn't even, it's just like, well, I just thought that was a little bit amusing. Even if it is dark humor, it was like, oh, well, that was just kind of funny to me. Maybe even if it's not something that you would necessarily repeat yourself, or you would be like, oh yeah, sure. And you would just like say that to anybody. And I don't know, there may even be sometimes that you maybe don't even want people to see that you're laughing at that particular thing, and it's like, oh my goodness, if such and such would see me, then they're going to judge me because I laughed at that, and it's like really dark humor, or it's the kind of like a that kind of like a mature comedy.
I don't mean to interrupt. I have to go. I'm probably gonna lose you. I got like 1%, and I left my charger over at the hospital, and I'm in my room at the Ronald McDonald, so I'm running that way. But I probably by the time I get there, class will be over.
All right, Jessica, if you lose you, we'll see you next week.
Okay.
What else do you guys think here of mine and Stacy's comments, especially about humor and sometimes the political correctness of humor these days? How we might perhaps take ourselves too seriously. I'll give you guys an example here. oftentimes in this class, I like to teach the movie Blazing Saddles. That's a movie I would encourage you guys to check out, especially after we did our Westerns unit. And The Blazing Saddles is a movie directed by the great Mel Brooks. Of course, if you've ever seen Young Frankenstein, right, he also did that. But Blazing Saddles is a movie that shocked people back in the 70s. But today, people don't get it. Like the movie uses, for example, the N word a lot. Like probably just like how Stacy counted with Goodfellas, how many F-bombs were in Goodfellas. The N word is probably in Blazing Saddles about that many times. But they use that to poke fun at like racist people in the late 60s, early 70s. So part of the movie's goal was saying that word so many times to make it look absurd. But like now, if somebody watches that movie for the first time, usually the first feeling is disgust, right? Because how can we use that word in a movie, right? But so oftentimes students will be like, why did you make me watch this movie for? Right? I'm just like, think about it. So that just goes to show how something that might be funny one day is not funny the next. If you talk to a lot of older people who are in the boomer or the boomer generation or the generation right after that, I forget what they're called. But a lot of those people love Blazing Saddles. But if you show it to most people my generation or younger, they're like, oh no, right? So yeah, that the type of content you can go near in a certain time and place is interesting too.
I agree. I was doing my essay on 16 Candles and the Breakfast Club, and there were a few comments in both of them that I was like, you definitely could not put that in today. People would be totally offended over that.
Did you notice one in particular?
Yeah, one in the Breakfast Club, Bender makes a comment about Claire pretty much impregnating her, and I was like, yeah, you could not put that in a movie today.
Yeah, I just rewatched 16 Candles a couple of days ago to prepare for class, but yeah, some of the stuff that what's his face, the nerdy kid who's in yeah, some of the stuff he says you couldn't put in you probably couldn't get away with today either.
Yeah, I noticed that as well when I was watching it for my presentation.
I think of it's not a movie, but Dave Chappelle, which he really doesn't care if he offends people, but a lot of people get offended by him, and he's just, he's a comedian, so, but people can't take his jokes.
Yeah, and he got kicked off his documentary or his comedy sketch got kicked off Netflix for a while, didn't it, Kashina? Then they put it back on or something.
Yeah, that wasn't that long ago when that happened.
Yeah, even if you guys go back and watch sitcoms from like the 70s and stuff, like if you ever watched like TV Land, the channel, right? You watch a show like All in the Family or something like that, or Sanford and Son, right? Some of those shows will, or even something really old like I Love Lucy or something like that, right? Those types of shows are interesting too, just to see what was funny in those days.
Something I've noticed, especially here recently, is like, especially back in the 90s, even a little bit in the early 2000s, the running joke was to make the used to be fat characters have the ongoing fat jokes. And I'm like, okay, can you beat the dead horse even more here? Like Friends, Monica. That was always a running joke. Monica was a fat kid. That was a big thing. The nanny, Fran, that was a big thing. Like her mom, even though her mom was a little bit bigger, she wasn't really even back then, especially she wouldn't even considered plus size that much. But she was known as the fat mom and like don't have food around her. She will eat everything up. I noticed that on how back then, even towards like just here recently, how much that sense of comedy has changed.
Yeah, that's an interesting example of something you don't see much now, right? It used to be very prominent, as you said.
Fun fact, the guy that played Michael Scott, Steve Carell, said The Office would not make it in today's climate if they were still making it, just because how many jokes were made, especially with Michael's character. And it's 100% correct, because I love The Office. I have nothing bad to say against The Office. I know other people have that show canceled in a heartbeat. It was still around today, especially with the whole pandemic. Because Dwight Schrute, that I would love to have an episode of that, but if there was, we instantly took it out, just because how today's audience is.
Yeah, of course, that was big in the late 2010s, late aughts, early 2010s. That's when The Office was at its peak. So that was when I was first going to college. That's when that show was really big. So yeah, I would agree, Jaden. You probably couldn't get away with some of Michael Scott's shenanigans these days.
I've watched that show probably a total of 20 times, and I have every season on DVD. So I love the show, but I know if they ever did like a reboot of and stuff like that, the whole show would just not be the same. So I have to cut out a lot of things just to make it presentable for a lot of today's audience.
Did you like the show after Steve Carell left?
I never liked Andy's character, but after Steve Carell left, I hated him even more, and the show did go downhill a lot. I did like how Daryl had a more appearance time, though. I love Daryl and Creed, two of my favorite characters.
The Office is my favorite too. Pam has a podcast and I listen to it. You should check that out, Jaden.
I love The Office. I love Creed and I love Dwight. I think those two are my favorite.
Speaking of Creed, is anyone else part of his cult on Discord? Just saying, it's a fun time just watch him on TikTok, and I'm trying my best not to go onto his Discord because I know who I am as a person.
I've seen that on TikTok, but there's a Facebook group called Creed Thoughts, and I thought about joining it because it just sounds so much fun.
Just the sneak peeks into his Discord just makes my day. I love how his real name is Creed Bratton. I think that's hilarious. But if you have not checked out his TikTok, Dr. Yeager, you should 100% just watch his videos because top notch.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, he was always one of my favorite characters on there too. The guy who plays Dwight, Jaden, Rainn Wilson, he has a really fun horror podcast too called Radio Rimple. If you ever want to check it out.
I've been trying to get into it,
but I can't follow him.
What is it?
I love Dwight. He's my favorite character, but I cannot follow him. I had to take him off my Instagram.
Really?
Yes.
Why so, Sheena?
Oh, he just a lot of different views than I have. And it was just so bad. I just had to take him off. I was like, gosh, I love you. Why do you have to be like this? Ugh.
Don't you hate when that happens? So like you love like the character so much, but then you realize how different the actor or actress is. I don't know how many times like I had to stop watching a show or movie just because I realized how bad the actual actor was in real life, like how terrible they are.
Yeah, I watched Small. I'm a big Superman fan, so I always liked Smallville. And like one of the characters in the show is like this quirky girl who likes Clark or whatever. And then you come to find out like she was like part of this like really weird sex cult in real life. Now she's in prison for branding other women. So I was just like, oh, I can't really watch Smallville anymore. Yeah, that definitely ruined that show for me. So
I think about what shows I watched back as a kid, and I realized how many jokes I've missed. Or I'll look up where the actor or something is now, and like most of them, not doing so great. Not doing so great. Like the director of iCarly and stuff. Now I'm going to go there, but I can't watch the shows the same anymore without knowing those facts.
That's
I
like
actually-
a screech.
I actually like one time I rewatched some SpongeBob episodes, I guess, and he picks up it's the episode where he's like he's trying to get Gary into the bathtub, and he's like, the balloons, don't drop them, and there's soap, and you're sitting there like, man.
There's one episode in SpongeBob where he was like, I was watching like something else, and he turns the channel off, like a nature show. And I look back at it today, like, oh, I know what that reference to.
yeah, another thing to say about comedy is it does bleed into other genres. We mentioned horror a few minutes ago. This movie is kind of a weird drama comedy, but like even when we talked about something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest back at the beginning of class, in many ways One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a comedy. This is something that me and Bill butted heads about during the production of our play because he says that it's not a comedy at all. I'm just like, of course it's a comedy in some parts, right? It's a really dark, messed up comedy, but it is one. So again, comedy is the hardest genre.
Anybody else want to punch Nurse? I think her name was Hatchet in the movie for making Billy kill himself. Like, anybody else wanted to punch her?
Yeah, it was interesting when we did our play because when McMurphy chokes her out at the end, like the high school kid audience, like they all like got up and started clapping and stuff. It was really funny. Some of our audiences, Stacy can probably attest from the night she went, some of our audiences were kind of quiet even after that, but the high school kids are like whooping and hollering, right? When he chokes Nurse Ratchet out at the end.
Yeah, it was, and I liked how it was a little bit different, but I always like to go and see I guess plays like that when I've watched the movie or something, and then go see. Shrek was like one when we went to see it, I think at the Coalfield Jamboree, like when they had that. But I actually liked that better because there used to be a musical, I think it's on Netflix, but it's like from Broadway. But I really think the one that they did in Logan was better than the one that was on Broadway. Maybe because I saw it, I don't know, and I was sitting right there. But I really like to see like some of the stuff. But I think like with the dark humor and the dark comedy, it's like I don't know. And somebody mentioned SpongeBob there, and there's almost like certain cartoons and stuff like that. Like SpongeBob is a good example because you can be sitting there watching it with your kid, and it's almost like they'll say something, and it's kind of like you as the adults like laughing, or even maybe trying not to laugh because you don't want them to realize that it's a joke or that it's something that's funny. But it's almost like it's kind of like an adult joke. And it's like, I don't want my kid to think that that's funny, but it's like, that was a pretty good one.
I don't know if you've ever watched it, but People Under the Stairs is a good horror comedy movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, just because I love Roach. I actually have a cat that I call Roach because he would live underneath our stairs, and like Roach lives in the walls. But that's if you teach this class, I think you said you're going to teach it in spring. You should totally look that up and see if you would add it to the list.
Horror.
It's really good.
Send me that in an email, Jaden. That way I'll remember.
I will.
Now, one final thought to end the day on, like even like if you watch superhero movies now, you guys noticed how like almost every superhero movie is a comedy. Like if you watch a Marvel movie or something, right? Like all of them have like this goofy sense of humor in these like tight spots that the heroes are in and stuff. Like that's also another instance where comedy bleeds over into other genres, and it works. It's part of the formula now, but it works, right? Look how much money all these movies make. Like Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance. Part of that whole movie's charm is its comedy.
Yeah, I agree. I watch that one with my boys quite a bit, and they say, yeah, I mean, there's several parts that, they're kind of cracking up in because that's something that they're kind of into, but all of those movies do, they have a little bit, I mean, it's not just like I guess some people that just think of comedies as you just sit down and like an Eddie Murphy movie and you're just cracking up the whole time. But there's, some of them, like you said before, that it's a really hard genre because there can be things like throughout the movie that it would be funny, but it's not necessarily considered what a lot of people just at first glance would be like, yeah, that's a comedy, that's a funny movie. But I guess there's just different versions of comedy.
Yeah, sometimes in those type of movies, like I'll roll my eyes. I'm like, that's really corny, right? But maybe I'm the corny one. I don't know. It's probably the case where I'm the corny one. I think you guys all have a sense of what my sense of humor is like after, especially Stacy, you and Kashina, who went through the gauntlet twice with me. I think both of you all probably know what makes me laugh at this point.
Just a little bit, yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it was a fun discussion. It was a discussion of Dr. Strangelove. It was also an interesting discussion of the sociology of comedy, we'll call it. So, yeah, I think that might be how I'll title the video, Dr. Strangelove and the Sociology of Comedy. So like I said, look out for some materials I'm going to post on the final paper. I'm going to try my best to get them up tonight. So look out for those. And hopefully by sometime next week, I'll have your sequel, prequel, remakes graded. Remember, you can still turn those in through tomorrow. So until next week, guys, for 16 Candles, take care, and we'll see you all next time.